Jessica had been dreaming about this moment for 5 long years. Every morning, she would sit in her tiny apartment, drinking coffee and scrolling through real estate websites, looking at properties she couldn't afford yet. But she had a plan. She worked extra hours at her consulting job, skipped expensive dinners, and saved every penny she could. The day finally came when her savings account hit the magic number. She called her real estate agent, practically vibrating with excitement. "I'm ready," she said. "Show me everything with water access within 50 miles. For 3 months, they looked at property after property. Some had tiny ponds that were more like puddles. Others had beautiful lakes, but the houses were falling apart. Then her agent called with something special. "I found a place I think you'll love," she said. "It's been on the market for a while because the price is high, but trust me, you need to see this." The drive took them down a winding country road lined with oak trees. When they turned into the driveway, Jessica's heart stopped. There it was, a beautiful 2-story house sitting on 15 acres of pure paradise. But the real treasure was behind the house. A crystal-clear lake stretched out like a mirror, reflecting the clouds above. The water was so clean she could see fish swimming near the shore. "This lake is completely private," her agent explained as they walked down to the water's edge. "It sits entirely on this property. The previous family owned this land for 3 generations. They built that little cabin over there for weekend fishing trips." Jessica could hardly contain herself. The cabin was like something from a fairy tale, with a small dock extending into the water. Tall pine trees surrounded the lake, creating perfect shade for hot summer days. She could already picture herself sitting on the dock with her morning coffee, watching the sunrise paint the water gold. But Jessica was smart about money. Before she got too excited, she hired the best real estate lawyer in town. "I want to know everything about this property," she told him. "Every detail, every document, every possible issue." The lawyer spent 2 weeks going through everything. He checked property boundaries, looked at old maps, and reviewed every piece of paperwork going back decades. He even hired a professional surveyor to measure the exact property lines. "Good news," he reported back. "This property is clean as a whistle. The lake and all the land around it belong entirely to whoever owns this house. There are no easements, no shared access rights, nothing. It's completely private." Jessica also spent time reviewing the neighborhood information. The house was part of a small community with an HOA, but that didn't worry her. The HOA documents talked about maintaining the main roads and keeping the neighborhood looking nice. There was mention of a community pool and tennis court, but nothing about any lake access. That made sense since her lake was clearly private property. The price was steep, $750,000. It was more than she had planned to spend, but this was her dream home. She made the offer and held her breath for 3 days until the sellers accepted. Moving day was magical. Jessica had hired professional movers, but she insisted on carrying some things herself. She walked down to the lake carrying her favorite coffee mug and sat on the dock for the first time as the actual owner. The water lapped gently at the posts, and a family of ducks paddled by without a care in the world. For the first 2 weeks, life was perfect. Jessica worked from her home office during the day, then spent her evenings by the lake. She bought a small fishing boat and learned to fish. She set up a comfortable chair on the dock and read books as the sun set. She even started inviting her parents over for weekend barbecues by the water. The lake became her sanctuary. After stressful days dealing with difficult clients, she would walk down to the water and feel all her tension melt away. She planted flowers around the cabin and hung string lights between the trees. This was exactly the peaceful life she had worked so hard to achieve. But on a Tuesday morning in her 3rd week, something strange happened. Jessica was working in her home office when she heard car doors slamming in her driveway. That was odd, since she wasn't expecting anyone. She looked out her window and saw 2 cars she didn't recognize parked near her house. Curious, she walked outside and couldn't believe what she saw. 4 people she had never met were walking around her property like they owned the place. One man was carrying a fishing rod and tackle box. A woman had a picnic basket and was spreading a blanket near her lake. 2 teenagers were already taking off their shoes, getting ready to swim. Jessica's heart started pounding. These were complete strangers on her private property, acting like they belonged there. She took a deep breath and walked over to them, trying to stay polite. "Excuse me," she said. "I think there might be some confusion. This is private property." The man with the fishing rod looked up and smiled. "Oh, you must be the new owner. We heard someone finally bought the old place. I'm glad you don't mind us using the lake. We've been coming here for years." Jessica felt confused. "I'm sorry, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. This lake is on my property. It's private." The woman with the picnic basket laughed. "Don't worry about it, honey. The HOA lady told us it was fine. She said the lake belongs to the whole community now that someone lives in the house again. She gave us permission to come anytime." Jessica's blood ran cold. What HOA lady? What? Permission? She had bought this property specifically because the lake was private. Her lawyer had confirmed it. The documents were clear. "I'm sorry," Jessica said, her voice shaking slightly. "But there's been a mistake. This lake is private property. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The teenagers looked annoyed. The adults seemed confused but started packing up their things. As they walked back to their cars, Jessica heard one of them say, "The HOA president said this would be fine. Maybe we should call her." Jessica stood by her lake watching the strangers drive away, feeling like her perfect world had just tilted off its axis. Who was this HOA president? Why did these people think they had permission to use her private lake? And more importantly, how many other people thought the same thing? That evening, Jessica couldn't concentrate on anything. She kept looking out her windows, half expecting to see more strangers wandering around her property. She pulled out all her legal documents and read through them again. Everything was clear. The lake was hers, completely and totally. But something told her this was just the beginning of her problems. Jessica didn't have to wait long to find out who this mysterious HOA president was. 3 days after the fishing incident, she was enjoying her morning coffee on the dock when she heard loud voices coming from her driveway. Through the trees, she could see a small group of people standing near her front door. She walked up to her house and found 3 people waiting for her. The woman in front was tall and thin, probably in her early 50s, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a stern expression. She was holding a thick folder and looked like she meant business. Behind her stood 2 other people who seemed uncomfortable, like they didn't really want to be there. "You must be Jessica," the blonde woman said without any greeting. "I'm Linda Richardson, president of the Oakwood Hills HOA. We need to talk." Jessica forced a smile, trying to stay polite. "Nice to meet you, Linda. What can I help you with?" Linda's expression didn't soften at all. "We have a problem. I've been getting calls from community members saying you've been turning people away from the lake. That's not how we do things around here." Jessica felt her stomach drop. "I'm sorry, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. The lake is on my private property. I have all the documents to prove it." Linda let out a laugh that wasn't friendly at all. "Documents can be misleading, honey. What matters is how things have always been done. This lake has been community property for as long as anyone can remember. Just because you bought the house doesn't mean you can suddenly change decades of tradition." Jessica's hands started shaking slightly. She had never been good at confrontation, but she knew she had to stand up for herself. "Linda, I spent a lot of money on this property specifically because the lake was private. My lawyer checked everything thoroughly. There are no easements or community access rights." Linda opened her folder and pulled out what looked like an old, faded map. This map from 1987 clearly shows community access to the lake. See this dotted line? That indicates shared recreational use. Your lawyer obviously didn't do his homework. Jessica looked at the map, squinting at the faded lines. Something about it didn't look right, but she couldn't put her finger on what bothered her. "Can I get a copy of this map? I'd like my lawyer to review it." "That won't be necessary," Linda said quickly, tucking the map back into her folder. "What we need is for you to be reasonable. The community has summer barbecues, fishing tournaments, and swimming parties. We've been planning our annual 4th of July celebration for months, and it's always held at the lake. You can't just destroy our community spirit because of some technicality." One of the people behind Linda finally spoke up. Maybe we should look at this more carefully, Linda. If the property documents say the lake is private. Linda whipped around and gave the man such a harsh look that he immediately went quiet. Then she turned back to Jessica with a fake smile that didn't reach her eyes. Look, Jessica, I've been managing this community for 15 years. I know how things work around here. You're new, so I'll give you some friendly advice. Homeowners who cooperate with the HOA have a much easier time than those who don't. We have rules about lawn maintenance, mailbox colors, house paint, landscaping, all sorts of things. It's much better to be part of the team than to fight against it. The threat was clear. Even though Linda had tried to dress it up as friendly advice, Jessica felt her face getting hot with anger, but she tried to keep her voice steady. I want to be a good neighbor, Linda, but I also have rights as a property owner. I need to protect my investment. Linda's fake smile disappeared completely. Your investment? You mean your expensive house that depends on community property values? Property values that are maintained by our HOA events and community spirit? You might want to think about that. The whole conversation was making Jessica feel sick to her stomach. She had worked so hard to buy this place, and now this woman was trying to bully her into giving up what was legally hers. I think we should end this conversation here, Jessica said. I'm going to have my lawyer review everything again, including that map you showed me. Linda's eyes narrowed. Fine. But don't say I didn't warn you. This community has ways of dealing with uncooperative homeowners. We'll see how you feel when you're getting violation notices every week for your grass being too long or your mailbox being the wrong shade of black. With that threat hanging in the air, Linda turned and marched back to her car, followed by her two uncomfortable companions. As they drove away, Jessica heard Linda talking loudly on her phone, though she couldn't make out the words. Jessica went back inside her house, but she couldn't concentrate on anything. She kept replaying the conversation in her mind, feeling more upset each time. She had never dealt with anyone like Linda before. The woman seemed to think she owned the entire neighborhood, including Jessica's private property. Over the next few days, things got worse. Jessica started receiving official-looking letters from the HOA almost daily. One complained that her grass was slightly above acceptable height limits. Another said her mailbox was not properly aligned with community standards. A third claimed her outdoor furniture was not in keeping with neighborhood aesthetic guidelines. Each letter demanded immediate compliance and threatened fines if the issues weren't corrected within 48 hours. Jessica spent hours measuring her grass, adjusting her mailbox, and moving her patio furniture around, trying to figure out what could possibly be wrong. But the letters kept coming. It seemed like Linda was finding new problems every day. The most ridiculous one claimed that Jessica's welcome mat was too casual for the neighborhood's standards. Meanwhile, more strangers kept showing up at her lake. Word had apparently spread through the community that the new owner was being difficult about lake access. People would arrive with fishing gear, picnic supplies, and even inflatable rafts, acting like they had every right to be there. Each time, Jessica had to go out and politely ask them to leave. Most people were understanding once she explained the situation, but a few got argumentative. One man actually yelled at her, saying she was ruining everything and that Linda had promised the lake would always be available for community use. Jessica started feeling like a prisoner in her own home. She was afraid to sit by her lake because she never knew when strangers would show up. She was constantly watching her mailbox for new violation notices. The peaceful sanctuary she had worked so hard to buy was turning into a source of constant stress. The worst part was feeling isolated from her neighbors. Linda had clearly been spreading stories about Jessica being selfish and unreasonable. When Jessica tried to introduce herself to other homeowners, they were polite but cold. She could tell they had heard Linda's version of events. 2 weeks after Linda's first visit, Jessica was at her breaking point. She was tired of fighting about every little thing, tired of strangers on her property, and tired of feeling like the bad guy for defending her legal rights. She realized the situation wasn't going to resolve itself peacefully. It was time to call her lawyer. Jessica's lawyer, David Thompson, listened carefully as she explained everything that had happened over the past month. His office was calm and professional, a welcome change from the chaos her life had become. When she finished talking, he leaned back in his chair and shook his head. "Jessica, I'm really sorry this is happening to you. What Linda is doing isn't just wrong, it's harassment. But I have to warn you, HOA disputes can get very messy and expensive." Jessica felt her heart sink. "What do you mean?" David pulled out her original property file. "Your ownership of the lake is absolutely clear. There's no question about that. But Linda seems determined to fight this, and unfortunately, she has the HOA's money behind her. That means she can drag this out for a long time without it costing her personally. So what do I do? Just give up my property rights?" "Absolutely not," David said firmly. "We're going to fight this properly. But you need to understand what you're getting into. This could take months or even years to resolve completely." Jessica spent the weekend thinking about David's warning. The legal fees alone could be enormous. But every time she looked out at her beautiful lake, she knew she couldn't give up. This was her home, her sanctuary, her future. She had worked too hard to let someone like Linda take it away. On Monday morning, she called David back. "I want to fight. Do whatever it takes." That's when things really started getting crazy. Linda seemed to take Jessica's decision to hire a lawyer as a personal insult. The violation notices increased to almost daily occurrences. Jessica would wake up to find new complaints about everything from her porch light being too bright to her car being parked improperly in her own driveway. But Linda wasn't done yet. 2 weeks after Jessica hired David, she got a knock on her door from a process server. Linda had filed an actual lawsuit against her, claiming the HOA had something called prescriptive easement rights to the lake. David explained it to Jessica in simple terms. "She's claiming that because people have been using your lake for years, they now have a legal right to keep using it, even though it's your property. It's a real legal concept, but in your case, it's complete nonsense. The previous owners never allowed community access. We have statements from them proving that." The lawsuit papers were thick and intimidating, full of legal language that made Jessica's head spin. But the basic claim was outrageous. Linda was saying that the entire community had always used the lake for parties, fishing, and swimming, and that Jessica couldn't suddenly stop them. "She's using HOA money to pay for this lawsuit," David explained. "That means every homeowner in your neighborhood is technically paying to sue you, whether they know it or not." The harassment got worse after the lawsuit was filed. Jessica installed security cameras around her property because strangers were showing up almost daily. Some just wanted to fish, but others seemed to be testing her resolve. One group actually brought a portable grill and started cooking burgers on her dock without permission. Linda organized what she called community meetings that were actually held in Jessica's driveway. 15 or 20 neighbors would gather on her property to discuss the lake situation, as if Jessica wasn't even there. When Jessica came out to ask them to leave, Linda would smile sweetly and say they were on community property, meaning the HOA maintained road that extended into Jessica's driveway. The most infuriating part was how Linda played the victim. She started a newsletter that went to every house in the neighborhood, talking about how Jessica was destroying community traditions and putting profits over people. She made it sound like Jessica was some kind of evil developer trying to ruin their family-friendly neighborhood. Jessica felt completely isolated. When she went to the grocery store, neighbors would whisper and point. Some people she had never even met would give her dirty looks. Linda had turned the entire community against her with her version of the story. The breaking point came on a Saturday in July. Jessica woke up to the sound of music and laughter coming from her backyard. She looked out her bedroom window and couldn't believe what she saw. There had to be 50 people at her lake with tables, chairs, a DJ, and even a bouncy castle for kids. Linda had organized a community appreciation day at Jessica's private lake without any permission whatsoever. There were people swimming, fishing, barbecuing, and playing volleyball on Jessica's beach. Someone had hung a banner between 2 trees that said, "Thanks for sharing, Jessica." Jessica called the police, but when they arrived, Linda had an answer for everything. She claimed there was a misunderstanding about property boundaries and that she would look into it. The police didn't want to get involved in what they saw as a civil dispute, so they just asked everyone to leave peacefully. Most people packed up and left, but the damage was done. Jessica's dock was broken, her flower beds were trampled, and there was trash everywhere. Someone had carved initials into one of her beautiful oak trees. It took her 3 days to clean up the mess. "This has gone too far," David told her when she called him on Monday. "Linda is escalating because she knows her legal case is weak. People don't usually throw parties on property they have legitimate rights to. They just use it normally." That's when David suggested bringing in a specialist. "I know a lawyer who deals specifically with property rights cases. Her name is Attorney Mitchell, and she's never lost a case like this. But I have to warn you, she's expensive and she doesn't mess around." Jessica was exhausted from months of fighting, but she knew she needed help. "Set up a meeting. I can't live like this anymore." Attorney Mitchell's office was different from David's. Where his was warm and comfortable, hers was all business. Awards and certificates covered the walls, along with newspaper clippings about cases she had won. She was probably in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. "I've reviewed your case," she said without any small talk. "Linda Richardson is running a scam, and she's been getting away with it because most people don't have the resources to fight back properly. But you do, and I'm going to help you destroy her case completely." Jessica felt a spark of hope for the first time in months. "You really think we can win?" Attorney Mitchell smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who enjoyed winning battles. "Win? Jessica, by the time I'm done with Linda Richardson, she's going to wish she had never heard your name. But I need you to understand something. We're not just going to defend against her lawsuit, we're going to go on the attack." "What do you mean?" "I mean, we're going to file countersuits for harassment, trespassing, defamation, and abuse of process. We're going to demand damages for all the stress and property damage she's caused. And we're going to make sure everyone in your neighborhood knows exactly what kind of person their HOA president really is." Jessica felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. This was exactly what she had been hoping for. But it also meant the war with Linda was about to get much more intense. "One more thing," Attorney Mitchell said as Jessica prepared to leave. "From now on, document everything. Every violation notice, every trespassing incident, every piece of harassment. We're going to need it all when we take Linda down in court." As Jessica drove home, she felt something she hadn't felt in months: confidence. Linda had picked the wrong person to mess with, and now she was about to find out just how wrong she had been. Attorney Mitchell wasn't kidding when she said she didn't mess around. Within a week of taking Jessica's case, she had a team of investigators working around the clock. Jessica had never seen anything like it. These weren't just lawyers, they were like detectives, digging into every detail of Linda's claims. The first breakthrough came from the most unexpected place. Attorney Mitchell had hired a document expert to examine that old map Linda had shown Jessica. When the expert put it under special lights and used chemical tests, the results were shocking. "This map is a complete fake," the expert explained to Jessica and Attorney Mitchell. "The paper is old, but the ink is modern. Someone printed this recently and then tried to age it artificially. You can tell because the ink composition includes chemicals that weren't used in printing until the late 1990s. Jessica couldn't believe it. "You mean Linda made a fake map?" "Not just fake," Attorney Mitchell said with satisfaction. "Fraudulent. This is evidence of deliberate deception in a legal proceeding. Linda is in serious trouble, but that was just the beginning." Attorney Mitchell's team had been busy contacting everyone who had ever owned property in the neighborhood. They found the family who had owned Jessica's house for 3 generations before selling it to her. All 3 surviving family members were willing to give sworn statements. "We never allowed community access to our lake," the elderly former owner told Jessica over the phone. "That was our private family retreat. We would have sold the property for much less money if it came with public access rights. Linda Richardson is lying." The investigators also discovered something interesting about Linda herself. She had been planning to sell her own house and move to Florida. But more importantly, They found text messages between Linda and her real estate agent that revealed her true motivation. "Look at these messages." Attorney Mitchell showed Jessica printouts of Linda's phone records. She's been advertising lake access as a selling point for neighborhood properties. She told her realtor that having community lake rights would increase her house value by at least $50,000. Jessica felt sick reading the messages. Linda had been using her property to inflate the value of everyone else's homes without any legal right to do so. It was all about money. Linda didn't care about community traditions or bringing neighbors together. She just wanted to make more profit when she sold her house. Meanwhile, Linda seemed to realize that her legal position was falling apart. Instead of backing down, she became more desperate and aggressive. The harassment campaign against Jessica intensified to levels that were almost unbelievable. Linda started organizing what she called peaceful protests on the public road in front of Jessica's house. 20 or 30 neighbors would gather with signs saying things like, "Share the lake" and "Community over greed." They would chant and play music, making it impossible for Jessica to work from home or enjoy any peace. The worst part was that Linda had convinced many neighbors that Jessica was the villain. These people genuinely believed they were fighting for their rights, not realizing that Linda had been lying to them from the beginning. Jessica felt horrible watching families, with children holding protest signs, knowing they had been manipulated. Linda also started a social media campaign against Jessica. She created a Facebook group called Save Our Community Lake and filled it with photos of families enjoying the lake before the new owner ruined everything. She posted Jessica's address and encouraged people to respectfully ask her to reconsider her selfish decision. The online harassment got so bad that Jessica had to delete her own social media accounts. Strangers from all over the county were sending her angry messages, calling her greedy and heartless. Someone even started a petition to force the city to take her lake through eminent domain. But Linda's desperation led to her making bigger mistakes. Attorney Mitchell's security cameras caught Linda sneaking onto Jessica's property at night, placing fake violation notices under her door. The notices claimed Jessica had violated rules that didn't even exist, like excessive bird feeding and unauthorized flower colors. Even worse, Linda was caught on camera trying to damage Jessica's dock. The footage clearly showed her loosening bolts and removing safety railings, apparently hoping to make the dock unsafe so she could file complaints about hazardous conditions on community property. "This woman has completely lost her mind," Attorney Mitchell told Jessica as they reviewed the security footage. "She's now committing actual crimes, trespassing, vandalism, filing false reports. She's handed us everything we need to destroy her in court." The investigation also revealed Linda's history of bullying other homeowners. Attorney Mitchell's team found 3 other families who had been harassed by Linda over the years. One elderly couple had been forced to spend thousands of dollars fighting bogus violation notices. Another family had actually moved away because Linda made their lives so miserable over their fence height. "Linda Richardson is a serial bully," Attorney Mitchell explained. "She's been using her position as HOA president to terrorize anyone who doesn't do exactly what she wants. You're not her first victim, Jessica, but if we do this right, you'll be her last." The most damaging evidence came from Linda's own HOA records. Attorney Mitchell subpoenaed all the HOA's financial documents and meeting minutes going back 5 years. What they found was shocking. Linda had been using HOA money like her personal bank account. She had paid for her own legal fees using community funds without getting approval from the other board members. She had organized expensive community events that were really just parties for her friends. She had even used HOA money to pay for landscaping around her own house. "This is embezzlement," Attorney Mitchell explained. "Linda has been stealing from every homeowner in your neighborhood for years. The other board members had no idea because she controlled all the financial records." When Attorney Mitchell contacted the other HOA board members with this information, their reaction was immediate and furious. They had been supporting Linda's lawsuit because they trusted her, not realizing she had been lying to them too. "We're calling an emergency board meeting," one of them told Attorney Mitchell. "Linda Richardson needs to be removed from her position immediately. We had no idea she was using our money to pay for personal legal battles." But Linda wasn't going down without a fight. When she realized the other board members were turning against her, she tried one last desperate move. She called the local news station and claimed she was being persecuted by a wealthy outsider who was trying to destroy their small community. The news interview was a disaster for Linda. The reporter had done his homework and asked her about the fake map, the misused HOA funds, and the harassment campaign. Linda became flustered and defensive, making herself look even worse. "I'm just trying to protect our community traditions," she kept repeating, but her answers became more and more contradictory. When the reporter asked her directly about using HOA money for personal legal fees, Linda actually hung up and walked away in the middle of the interview. The news story that aired painted Linda as exactly what she was, a corrupt HOA president who had been abusing her power for years. The reporter interviewed Jessica too, and her calm, reasonable responses made her look like the victim she truly was. After the news story aired, public opinion in the neighborhood began to shift. Many neighbors who had supported Linda started asking questions. How could they have been so wrong about the situation? Why hadn't Linda told them the truth about the property rights? Attorney Mitchell was ready for trial, armed with mountains of evidence: fake maps, embezzled funds, security footage of trespassing and vandalism, sworn statements from previous property owners, and Linda's own text messages admitting her real motivations. Linda Richardson picked the wrong fight with the wrong person, Attorney Mitchell told Jessica as they prepared for court. "By the time we're done, she's going to wish she had never heard your name." Jessica felt nervous but confident as the trial date approached. After months of harassment and stress, she was finally going to get her day in court. Linda had thrown everything she could at Jessica, but truth and law were on Jessica's side. The battle was almost over, and Jessica was ready to win. The courthouse was packed on the morning of the trial. Jessica couldn't believe how many people had shown up. There were neighbors she recognized, local reporters, and even some people she had never seen before who had apparently heard about the case on social media. Jessica sat next to Attorney Mitchell, feeling nervous but determined. Across the courtroom, Linda sat with her lawyer, looking confident but somehow smaller than Jessica remembered. The months of investigation had taken their toll on Linda. She looked tired and stressed, nothing like the intimidating woman who had first showed up at Jessica's door. Judge Williams called the court to order and explained that they would be hearing Linda's original lawsuit first, then Jessica's counterclaims. Linda's lawyer stood up to present their case, and Jessica couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Your Honor, my client seeks to establish prescriptive easement rights to the lake based on decades of community use. The residents of Oakwood Hills have been using this lake for family gatherings, fishing, and swimming since the 1980s. Ms. Jessica cannot suddenly prevent this long-standing community tradition." Attorney Mitchell had prepared Jessica for this, but it was still surreal hearing someone argue that her private property belonged to everyone else. Linda's lawyer presented old photographs of neighborhood barbecues and claimed they showed evidence of continuous community use of the lake. But when Attorney Mitchell stood up for cross-examination, everything fell apart for Linda's case. She had blown up copies of the photographs, and under closer inspection, they clearly showed the events taking place at the community pool and tennis courts, not at Jessica's lake. "These photos actually prove the opposite of what you claim," Attorney Mitchell told Linda's lawyer. "They show that community events were held at the actual HOA facilities, not at my client's private lake." Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Attorney Mitchell called the document expert to the witness stand to testify about Linda's fake map. The expert explained in simple terms how he had proven the map was created recently, not in 1987 as Linda claimed. The ink contains synthetic compounds that weren't available until 1998 at the earliest, the expert testified. Someone created this document specifically to support false claims about property rights. When Linda's lawyer tried to object, Judge Williams cut him off. "Are you telling me your client presented fraudulent evidence to support her case?" Linda's lawyer looked embarrassed. "Your Honor, my client provided this document in good faith. We had no reason to question its authenticity, but Judge Williams wasn't buying it. Someone created a fake historical document to claim rights to property they don't own. This is a very serious matter." Next, Attorney Mitchell called the former property owners to testify. The elderly man who had owned Jessica's house for 40 years spoke clearly and firmly. We never allowed community access to our lake. It was our private family retreat. We fished there with our grandchildren and had small family gatherings, but never community events. If there had been public access rights, we would have sold the property for much less money. Jessica watched Linda's face as the testimony continued. Linda looked shocked, as if she couldn't believe these people were contradicting her story. Jessica realized that Linda might have actually convinced herself that her lies were true. The most damaging testimony came from Linda's own text messages. Attorney Mitchell had them displayed on a large screen so everyone in the courtroom could read them. Linda had written to her real estate agent, "The lake access will add at least $50,000 to my selling price. Everyone knows community lakes increase property values significantly." Ms. Linda, Attorney Mitchell said, reading directly from the phone records. Then you also wrote, "I don't care what the legal documents say. As long as I'm HOA president, this neighborhood will have lake access. The new owner will just have to deal with it." Linda's lawyer objected, but the messages were already part of the official evidence. The damage was done. Everyone could see that Linda's lawsuit wasn't about community traditions. It was about money. But the real fireworks started when Linda took the witness stand to defend herself. Attorney Mitchell had warned Jessica that this would be the most important part of the trial. People like Linda usually fall apart under cross-examination because they're not used to being challenged by someone who knows the truth. At first, Linda tried to stick to her story. She claimed the lake had always been used by the community and that Jessica was being unreasonable. But when Attorney Mitchell started asking specific questions, Linda's story began to crumble. "Ms. Linda, you testified that families have been using this lake since the 1980s. Can you name one family who used it before 2023? Linda hesitated. "Well, there were many families over the years. I asked for one specific name, just one family. I don't remember specific names, but everyone knew they could use the lake." Attorney Mitchell pulled out sworn statements from a dozen longtime neighbors. "I have testimony from residents who have lived in Oakwood Hills for over 20 years. Not one of them remembers any community access to this lake before you became HOA president. How do you explain that?" Linda's face was getting red. "They're probably just supporting her because she's wealthy." "Ms. Linda, are you saying that 12 of your neighbors are lying under oath?" Judge Williams leaned forward. "Answer the question, Ms. Linda. I just know that we've always considered the lake part of our community." Attorney Mitchell wasn't done. She pulled out Linda's HOA financial records and displayed them on the screen. "Ms. Linda, these records show that you used HOA funds to pay for your personal legal fees in this case. You spent over $20,000 of your neighbor's money without their permission. Is that correct?" Linda looked panicked. "Those were legitimate community expenses." "Community expenses? You used HOA money to sue a homeowner for trying to protect her private property rights?" She was being unreasonable. "That's not what I asked. Did you or did you not use HOA funds for personal legal expenses without board approval?" Linda was silent for a long moment. Finally, she whispered, "Yes." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Several neighbors who had supported Linda looked shocked and angry. Jessica felt sorry for them. They had trusted Linda and been betrayed just like she had. But Attorney Mitchell still wasn't finished. She played the security camera footage of Linda trespassing on Jessica's property and trying to damage the dock. The video was crystal clear, showing Linda sneaking around at night with tools. "Ms. Linda, is that you in this video, vandalizing my client's property?" Linda watched herself on the screen, looking trapped. "I was just checking for safety violations. By loosening the bolts on a dock at midnight? While trespassing?" Linda couldn't answer. She just sat there looking defeated. Judge Williams had heard enough. He called for a brief recess, but when court resumed, his decision was swift and decisive. "I have never seen such a clear case of harassment and abuse of legal process," Judge Williams said. "Ms. Linda, Your claims about prescriptive easement rights are completely without merit. The evidence shows that Ms. Jessica owns her lake entirely, with no community access rights whatsoever. He turned to look directly at Linda. Furthermore, your conduct throughout this dispute has been appalling. You created fraudulent documents, misused HOA funds, trespassed on private property, and conducted a systematic harassment campaign against a homeowner who was simply defending her legal rights. Jessica felt tears of relief running down her face. After months of stress and fighting, she was finally being vindicated. But Judge Williams wasn't done. Ms. Linda, you are ordered to pay damages to Ms. Jessica in the amount of $125,000, covering her legal fees, property damage, and compensation for the harassment you put her through. Additionally, you are permanently banned from entering Ms. Jessica's property for any reason. The courtroom buzzed with excitement. Linda looked stunned, as if she couldn't believe what was happening. Furthermore, Judge Williams continued, I am referring this case to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges related to the fraudulent documents and embezzlement of HOA funds. Linda's lawyer tried to say something, but Judge Williams held up his hand. This case is closed, Ms. Jessica. You have my apologies for what you've been put through. Your property rights are fully protected by this court. As people filed out of the courtroom, several neighbors approached Jessica to apologize. We're so sorry, one woman said with tears in her eyes. Linda told us you were trying to destroy our community. We had no idea she was lying to us. We feel terrible about the protests and everything else, a man added. We were just trying to protect what we thought were our rights. We didn't know Linda was stealing from the HOA. Jessica forgave them all. She understood that they had been manipulated just like she had been, in a different way. 6 months later, Jessica was finally able to enjoy her lake in peace. The new HOA board had apologized officially and implemented new rules to prevent anyone from abusing their position, like Linda had done. Linda's house had gone into foreclosure, and she had moved away quietly, still facing potential criminal charges. Jessica's property value had actually increased because of all the publicity about her beautiful private lake. She had used some of the money from tea